Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we could have a game change in the pornographic email scandal, and we have some pretty big elections next year. Dave Patty will review. We'll do all of that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, here we go. It wouldn't be Pennsylvania Newsmakers or almost any Sunday commentary show in the state if we didn't talk about Kathleen Kane and the pornographic email scandal, or the pornographic scandal. SCF, they were transmitted by email. I have John Misick, he's the editorial page editor of the Patriot News Penn Live, and Robert Swift, he's the Capitol reporter for Times Shamrock newspapers. John, let me start with you. Every week there's would you call it breaking news, right?
Yeah, I mean, just when you think you can say safely, well, it can't possibly get any weirder in the Kane case, it goes and gets way, way, way deeply weird.
Yeah, now tell us about this. All of a sudden, in a case involving an African-American lawmaker from Philadelphia who was charged with taking a bribe, we got word that, and you finished my sentence, who got pornographic email?
Yeah, so anyway, Louise Bishop, state rep from Philly, pleads no contest in Dauphin County Court over on, Wednesday, this past Wednesday. And in the midst of that, the prosecutor in the case reveals that Kane's sister, Ellen Granahan Goffin, apparently received 58 emails, pornographic emails, that she then forwarded to the Attorney General. Or, well, to Kane, who was not yet then
Who was
Attorney
not
General.
yet. So Kathleen Kane was well aware that these...
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, it's like a grenade in the middle of this. I mean, if she knew way back when that this apparently existed, I mean, and again, they're denying, and it's just bizarre.
Yeah. Robert, you've been covering you've been through, all the problems with impeachment of a Supreme Court justice with 30 or 40 lawmakers that have been, convicted of various things. Does this have the potential to weaken? Kathleen Kane's big argument has been that the old boys in Harrisburg were trying to take me down. They knew that I knew once we did an investigation into Jerry Sandusky's the prosecution of Jerry Sandusky by folks in the Attorney General's office, that there was this pornographic email being circulated inside the AG's office and outside of it. Does this have a chance to weaken her whole case, would you think?
I think it would. And one of the things here, some of the worst of these emails circulating around among all these people is not so much pornographic in one way, but some racial stereotyping.
Right.
And jokes along that nature, and sexist jokes, gender jokes, and that has shown up at least in some of these ones exchanged between Kane and her sister. So that's cropping up in there too. And at the same time, you have the spectacle of the Supreme Court Justice Michael Eakin going before a court body on this coming Monday.
Right.
To plead his case, and it makes you wonder, is there all Kane has had from the courts is a law license suspension now, and you wonder if this starts to kick them in action again.
Yeah. John, I'm almost out of words. I mean, you've written about your blog, and by the way, Penn Live blog, John blogs on it. You could read follow Robert on Twitter. I mean, I'm almost speechless because I don't know where. There's a new angle to this that has huge implications in theory. I mean, look, let's take a look at this thing. There were 4 African-American lawmakers and an African-American traffic judge who were charged with, in effect, taking bribes.
Right.
Okay? And Kane said, no, we can't prosecute them because there was racial targeting. Mm-hmm. The African-American District Attorney of Philadelphia, Seth Williams, has now prosecuted all of them successfully.
Yep.
And Kane didn't even show up at the hearing, where she was supposed to provide testimony that there was racial targeting, if you will.
Right.
I mean, and without getting into whether there was targeting or not, she says she's going to appear. She's asked to, then she doesn't show up, leaving the defense lawyer in the case, defending Bishop, hung out to dry.
Yeah, it's just, again, there's just the bizarre plot twists every single time. And the one thing that kind of stands out is Kane's spokesman, Chuck Ardo,
right,
saying Wednesday last that that these emails really weren't that offensive. Well, they're on Penn Live right now.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
and
get
all you
on
have to do
Penn
is scroll
Live.
through like the first 3 of them to realize that that's put completely to the lie. And just when there's plot twist after plot twist after plot twist, and it just gets worse and worse.
Yeah, go ahead.
Out of all these issues with Kane and the grand jury investigations, and you got all these issues have been kicked up about grand jury secrecy, the qualifications to be an attorney general, the operations of the Judicial Conduct Board. Some of these involve constitutional amendments. Some, issues that are what penalties for having pornographic material on state computers. It's almost you would need at some point maybe a special session to deal with it all.
Oh my gosh.
And on top of that, Terry, you've got Justice Aiken saying that he never meant for any of these emails to become.
Go ahead. He's
right.
a Supreme Court justice who received these email and who transmitted these email. And go ahead. I mean,
again, he said they were never intended to become public. Well, guess what? They're on public email servers.
Yeah.
So they're going to eventually become public. It's staggering. It's staggering.
I mean, I don't think I can recall anything in my 30 or so years of doing where a story is more convoluted. I mean, typically, when we had Ernie Prieta, a former Attorney General, who was prosecuted and ultimately convicted of mail fraud, it involved illegal campaign contributions. Before he took office, it's there, it's done, it's over. Then you have just this year. The state treasurer, right? Yeah. The state treasurer, Rob McCord, pleading guilty to extortion. It's over.
Yeah, McCord followed the mode. You plead or whatever, your sentence, you resign, you release a list of your accomplishments. I always loved that. They put their accomplments the last thing they do.
Okay, one more comment, and then we'll go to a break.
So that's the thing.
And it's been months and months, and he's not been sentenced yet. All right, well, guess what? We have to talk a bit about the state budget, or the lack thereof. We'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
John Misick and Robert Swift join me. They're reporters. They've been covering the Capitol for many years. John Misick, of course, is also the editorial page editor of the Patriot News. Robert, let me start with you on this. As we tape this show, we're still in no person's land about where this budget goes. It looks like the Republicans in the House have been really having trouble getting the tax votes to do basically a $600 million increase in the budget. Do I got that about right?
That's right, and they've been at this now pretty intensely for at least 2 weeks, where they've broken away from a budget framework, which has never been publicly revealed.
Yeah.
That was done in November. And all throughout this, I've been struck by the lack of transparency about what's going on to the public in these negotiations. And we're dealing here with a lot of activity takes place behind closed doors in party caucuses. We get conflicting statements about what goes on in negotiations with meetings.
Yeah.
So it's really, I'm starting to, I think the credibility of everyone involved is taking a hit.
So your point is that they've not been very transparent about it, and you get conflicting stories here and there about what's going on.
That means we're not sitting in that.
Yeah. Now, I would expect that from two reporters. You want the information to give to the public,
as
right?
much as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely.
The caucus leaders have argued they're not going to release their tax bills because they don't want to expose their members to, something potentially politically.
Yeah.
They don't put it up, but they want to put it up to one vote when they know they have all the votes, so they can't get hit with it later on. Well, that's as maybe, but at the same time, though, we're talking about taxes that the public is going to have to pay, and they deserve to know what their tax increases are going to be. I mean, we know, Terry, that the Senate plan has an expansion of the state sales tax.
Right.
But what we don't know still, really, is what that expansion is going to cover and what items are going to be under the aegis of this expanded sales tax. And frankly, the public deserves to know that.
Yeah, and they're talking about raising a good bit of money on some exemptions. What we're talking about here is removing exemptions to the sales tax that already exists. Exactly. We've heard that it's on things like, you go to tourist attractions, you might have
parks,
amusement parks, cable bills. Now, we're just speculating here. The producer in my ear just said textbooks. That'll go over big with college students. I mean, but basically the problem is in the House, if I understand it, where the Republicans agreed through one of their leaders and then disagreed through another leader to this so-called framework
Many
that John
of the, especially lawmakers in the House Republican caucus, signed no tax pledges when they first ran. So they start with that. And the inability to try to, Governor Wolf's made concessions on the severance tax.
Sure.
People forget that that's off the table now.
Right.
But the ability to get to any kind of agreement on some more revenue is holding us up. I've started to wonder whether it's going to take some outside event to break this, some catalyst. It could be if a major school district actually does close, a weather event, a major hit in a credit rating, something from outside.
You both of you covered lots of demonstrations. I mean, in the past when you had these, because state workers were off the job and there were lots of services curtailed. I mean, you couldn't walk through the halls of the Capitol.
Yeah,
am I right with the demonstration?
No,
nothing
it's true.
now, right?
Thanks to that 2009 court decision, that lever has been taken off the table. But I think RB is right. It's going to take some sort of cataclysmic event. We have some school districts now saying that when they come back from holiday break, that unless they borrow money, they're going to have to close. I mean, that could well be the lever. I mean, keep in mind, we're also we're months away from the start of a campaign season. We're like 6 weeks away from
another
budget speech. It's a mess.
Well, two intersecting dates are coming up. One is, I think January 26th is a date that candidates can start to file nominating petitions to run for legislative. That's also the end of January is what you hear about school districts
running out of money,
closing their doors. So it's that last week of January intersection.
Yeah, and the other point is that it seems to me, if Governor Wolf has made this argument, well, we know there's a $1.6 billion deficit, at least that. We'll put that on the table, structural deficit. If they do a smaller budget, John Misick, are we going to be back here next year?
Well, yeah.
Because they won't have the revenue to cover...
Yeah, I mean, the Senate says that its version of the budget, this $30.8 billion spending plan that it passed, would at least begin to address the structural deficit problems. The House budget, as near as I can understand it, does not.
30.3 billion, something like that.
Depending on whose worldview prevails, we could be back here doing it again.
All right. Well, as we tape this, we're going to go and Dave Patty's going to come up, and we're going to get into, as Robert mentioned, in a month or so, we're going to be filing petitions, or getting ready for offices for next year. I want to review some of that. But as they point out, we could be here next year talking about the same issues. Dave Patty's next.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, the aforementioned Dave Patty, he's president of the Pennsylvania Business Council, joins me to talk about these elections. As you heard in the last segment, a little more than a month, they're going to be circulating petitions to run for office in the state. It seems like we've just been through all that, Dave, right?
Yeah, well, we're going to have another election whether we need one or not.
Need one or not, yeah. All right, well, look, you've followed and covered and written about state politics for a long time. Let's start with Republican presidential contest. We have an April primary, April 26th. It's relatively late. We haven't played much of a role over the years as you've commented on and I've commented on, is there an outside chance with all these candidates that the Republican contest could go on for some time? Is that, it's at least
well, I mean,
possible?
there are 35 primaries or caucuses, something like 35 before
Right.
Pennsylvania when
That's
we
a
go on
lot.
April 26th. So that's a lot. On the other hand, if you think back 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton's win in Pennsylvania made her credible again. You know,
Yeah, good point.
gave her a little bit of resurgence going into the Democratic nomination. So with this crowded a field, and I keep thinking, as everybody does, I think that okay, it can't be just Trump, Carson, or even Cruz. There's going to be one of the governors hanging around or somebody hanging around. So a late surge in the Mid-Atlantic states, because when we go, I think Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Rhode Island, you know, are all that time. So that, you know, could there be an East Coast surge by one of the moderates? You know, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, and a lot of the candidates don't have anything to lose. We're obviously talking, there were the debate that took place last week, 9 Republicans in the main stage, 4 on the the cocktail
Kids,
hour
right.
debate or whatever they want to call it. So we have 13 candidates. A lot of them don't have anything to lose by staying in the race, do they?
Right, and some of them are running really well on a shoestring between social media and the debates.
Yeah.
Frankly, Lindsey Graham, who keeps distinguishing himself to people as like, wow, why is he not on the main stage? There's the one adult.
Oh,
one.
I thought he was of the 4 candidates by far. Well, you're in his wheelhouse. He's of course a senator from South Carolina. Knows a good bit about foreign policy, but it doesn't seem to gain any traction. All right, let's move on. We have a huge race for the United States Senate. Pat Toomey's up. It's probably one of the top 5 races that will decide what?
Sure, it'll decide control of the Senate, which is everything for policymaking.
Right.
And of course in the Senate we also have that oddity where it's 50 or 51's not enough. It's really how close to 60 are you for the cloture votes.
That's correct.
And so you need everybody you can in there.
Yeah. Now, my sense about this is that Toomey is going to be harder to beat than a lot of people think, largely because he's not flamboyant, he's not overly controversial. He's conservative. We're not going to argue about
but he's
that.
also, when he's worked with Joe Manchin from West Virginia on some, what I will term reasonable gun control issues. Certainly the NRA doesn't like it necessarily, but it doesn't go so far that the conservatives are going to throw him out and say, well, he's gone rhino on us or something. And it gives him a little cachet with moderates in the suburban areas around Philadelphia, in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I think it's his to lose, essentially.
Yeah. The one concern that I've heard expressed, and it's one that strikes me as something we need to watch, is if one of the presidential candidates wins 8, 10 points, we can pick the percentage. Right. With the increase in state party voting, it could carry others in the ticket along with them. So Toomey could win or lose, to some extent based on what happens in the presidential election.
Sure. I mean, one of the fears you hear expressed in Pennsylvania, and you probably heard of Pennsylvania Society, was a strong Hillary campaign versus, say, something like Donald Trump or right. Cruz, where there would be a huge differential in southeastern Pennsylvania.
With the moderate
and that pulls out
Republicans.
moderates and liberals to come vote
right.
to make sure that the conservative doesn't win, and then that hurts Pat Toomey.
All right, I'm chatting with Dave Patty. We're doing a review of what could happen next year. Obviously, on this program and others, we're going to be dealing with big elections. We're going to run to a break. We have 3 very important, what we call row office elections: Auditor General, State Treasurer, and I'm going to say an Attorney General. We're going to get into that with Dave, and then we may talk about some other elections after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back. I'm talking with Dave Patty. January 26th, that's not far away. All these petitions are going to get filed for a variety of offices in the state legislature, Congress. We're going to talk also about these important row offices. Dave Patty, 2 of the 3 statewide offices, let's be candid, have been mired in scandal.
Right. I mean, you have Rob McCord, who's awaiting sentencing, supposedly still cooperating with prosecutors, but former state treasurer who's left office. Tim Reese appointed with the agreement that he would not
won't run.
And
So
he's a great guy,
open.
but doing a good job. But that's an open seat.
Right.
And then the attorney general's race. So, I mean, with the Kathleen Kane thing, while she hasn't definitively said she's running for re-election, she hasn't said she's not.
Yeah.
Now, there are so many Democrats parting to that race. Kind of sounds to me like their party has said, no, you're not. And the big news this week, that Stephen Zappala, the DA from Allegheny County. I don't know if he clears the field a little bit. You have a federal prosecutor from the Southeast, Jack Stolheimer, I think is the way of saying his name. John Morganelli, perennial, great guy, will never win a Democratic primary. It's too conservative for
John Morganelli is the DA of Northampton County. So we have former prosecutors.
Well, and then Josh Shapiro supposedly was going to run.
Josh Shapiro, a popular Montgomery County commissioner. And we have also another lawyer, I think, from Western PA named Fawcett.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. Yes, I forgot Mr. Fawcett. So,
yeah, he's running. So what we're saying here is the Democratic primary for Attorney General could have 5 and maybe more candidates. Is that correct?
Right. On the Republican side, so far we have 2 that we know of.
2, right.
Senator John Rafferty and Representative Todd Stevens.
Okay.
Both from Montgomery County.
They can fight it out for the Montgomery County.
They'll have the Southeast. Both very credible candidates. Although people, I think there have been people wondering, would a big Republican
let's
name
put it
get
this way: on both sides of the aisle, it looks like they're pretty strong candidates. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah.
Strong candidates.
Right.
All right, so we got that nailed.
Now, Zappala's going to have some name ID and being from Allegheny County and some money-raising abilities.
Right? All right. The other election race, Eugene DePasquale, Auditor General, and we're not picking sides, but he's pretty popular. He's done a pretty decent job. We're not taking sides.
I'll take a side and say I can't think of any reason not to root for him.
I'm neutral on it, but he does have a pretty good reputation, right?
Not knowing who might run against him, because nobody has declared yet.
And that says something.
If I look at the job and look at the definition and say, how's he doing relative to that definition, I'm happy.
Yeah, but that tells you something, doesn't it?
It does.
It looks like 2 of the 3 offices could be very competitive.
Yeah, Treasurer, you have Otto Voigt from Reading, who has been making the rounds, just grinding it out. A very successful businessman who's no one's ever heard of in politics, but he's grinding it out. On the Democrat side, Joe Torcell and the name Albert Knoll, Catherine Baker Knoll's son, making the rounds.
All right. Yeah. Well, this is complicated, but you'll come back and we'll get through it piece by piece later. We'll see you next week. Another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Have a great Christmas and a great holiday. We'll see you soon.